Welcome to If the Public Only Knew, the show that pulls back the curtain on what it really takes to build and lead a business. Host Gary Cinderbrandt sits down with some of today's most dynamic CEOs, founders, and leaders to dig into their origin stories, hard-earned lessons, and the missteps that nearly derailed it all. These are unfiltered, no-hype conversations designed to inspire, challenge, and fuel your own journey. Now here's your host, Gary Cinderbrandt.
Welcome back to If the Public Only Knew. I'm your host, Gary Cinderbrandt. And today I have an unusual opportunity and a privilege to welcome a guest whose resume would probably take me the entirety of this podcast to introduce. So let's start with his name. Lamell McMorris, PhD, doctorate in law and politics. Now, before Lamell tells us his story, which I cannot wait to hear, a little bit of a precursor. Those of you that have listened to the podcast in the past know that I'm increasingly fascinated with the entrepreneurial spirit, people that literally make something out of nothing. So when I started to look at Lamell's background, I was basically sold from the minute I saw the title of his current book, The Power to Persist. Lamell, welcome to the podcast.
Gary, thank you very much for having me. And let me say something right out the gate. You know, I define an entrepreneur as someone that goes on top of a building, jumps off, and figures out what's going to happen on the way down. That's literally how, entrepreneurs really, operate in essence. So I'm glad to be here. And so let's jump and let's see what happens.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And I have a few things to add to that as we go. So this whole concept of persistence,
Yes.
determination, jumping off the building.
Yes.
What point did you wake up to the fact that your future path would be defined by persistence as opposed to you go to school, you study this, you get a job, and off you go? When did that happen, Lamell? Take me through that.
So, the book was born out of a question of, how do I keep going? How do you keep going? What makes you continue to move forward? But this notion of persisting and where I am today and as an entrepreneur came from being fired, right? Sometimes it's actually an impediment or what we view as an impediment or a roadblock that actually propels us to our greater good and what we really should be doing. And so I was in running a historic civil rights organization, and I thought I was going to be on that path of social justice, community action in that regard as the leader, but I was fired at 27 years old in Atlanta, running a historic civil rights organization connected to Dr. King. And it was at that moment of being fired that I figured out that, well, it looks like I'm not going to be this, premier civil rights leader. Perhaps I can combine what I believe is my calling in this work and my mission in this work with an entrepreneurial endeavor. And so I went to Washington, D.C., no staff, no clients. And I heard about these folks and, over the years during my work, these folks who were lobbyists. And I just figured that they combine great relationships with good information. And I could do that. And so I went to D.C. in 2002, no staff, no clients, and started a lobbying firm from the ground up. That's what entrepreneurs do.
So you get to D.C. Obviously, lobbying is potentially, if you're successful, there's a lot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Right.
How do you break into that? What do you do? How do you decide? Are you going for an industry you're going to lobby for? Are you going to lobby for your mission in civil rights? I mean, it's a pretty broad.
It is very broad. And again, when you're an entrepreneur, you hang a shingle up, and almost anybody who comes and gives you a shot, you'll take it, right? It was a rocky first 6 months. I put my office right across the street from the from the White House at a place called the Willard offices. I knew that a premier address, 1455 Pennsylvania Avenue, and everyone knew that the White House was at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue would at least be one thing that would get everyone's attention. But there were obstacles against me. There are 40,000 registered lobbyists at the time in Washington, D.C., individuals that had everything that I didn't have: expertise, credibility. They'd worked in the White House, they'd worked on the Hill, they'd worked for a congressional member, they worked in a cabinet agency. I was just crazy enough to believe that there was something different about what I would bring to the table and could bring to the table that would differentiate me from everyone else. And it turns out, 25 plus years later, it's worked out. I'm still hanging on.
Did you know at the time what that thing was that would be special?
I knew I brought a focus and a perspective around policy that would be unique, being able to engage both corporate interests with the opportunity and the ability to do good, not just philanthropically, but from a policy perspective. And, I could merge, and I have merged the worlds that I come from, both in business and those individuals who are doing community and great positive impact. And I've been able to merge those two worlds, and it's been exciting.
Okay, so I get the connectivity part. I want to go
Yes.
further back. I want to go further back than that.
Yes.
You grew up in the South Side of Chicago.
That's where we're talking live from.
We're
I'm right
talking
here in
live.
in the basement of my childhood home
I
talking to you.
love that. What's for dinner?
That's a great question. I need
What's
to
mom
go
cooking?
upstairs and ask my mom, actually.
I'm sure it's going to be great. Um, so growing up,
Yes.
when did you first get the itch that you didn't like the world the way it was, and you weren't going to sit around and be a bystander? You were going to do something about it.
It came very early. Here in Chicago, especially at a time where I grew up in the 70s, but I was also always just different in that I was the kid, Gary, who knew who my alderman was. I knew the name of the governor. I knew who my state representative. I knew the members of Congress. I knew who the mayor was. I was always the current events kid. And I tell everyone, and young people especially, that in all of our lives, and I know you can relate to this, there is a line. It may not be straight, and especially as an entrepreneur, it may not be a straight line. It may go over here at some point, it may go over there, but we can draw a line from my childhood to everything that I'm doing at this moment. I was always attracted to advocacy. I was always attracted to policy. I always knew what was happening in and around the news. And Chicago, right, is that kind of place, right? It is known for being a highly active, politically engaged environment. And that really resonated with me. And there was one individual in particular that really sealed the deal, if you will, for me when it comes to policy and advocacy. And that was Harold Washington. When Harold Washington became the first black mayor of Chicago, that had a lot of meaning both for me and my community. But as someone who was already attracted to policy and politics, that was like the icing on the cake. And to this day, Harold Washington looms very large for me as a catalyst for what I do.
As a brief aside, when I went to my daughter's graduation at Northwestern,
Ah,
uh, the commencement speaker was a freshman senator by the name of Barack Obama.
yeah, that's a name we all know.
We walked out going, man, wouldn't it be great if he were president? Lo and behold. So
Lo and
talk
behold,
about, yeah, Chicago being there.
indeed.
So I understand where you're coming from with that.
Yes.
Um, were you with your friends? Did they wonder why you were so invested in this? Did you have other people like it, or would they call you up on a weekend and say, come on, Lamell, we're going out, and you're going, no, I got to go to this rally in Evanston? How did that
Yeah.
work?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was at a wedding with some friends here in Chicago on Sunday, and the joke really was during some of the conversation when we were going to the mall. This is what my buddies were saying. We were going to the mall. Lamel was headed to a meeting, right? I was always that kid with a suit on, with a briefcase, uh, you know, doing what I do now, engaging, activating, advocacy, leading efforts. Yes, I was the kid who led the walkouts. I was the kid who was at the table with adults making decisions around policy issues going in and on and around our school, both, grammar school, high school, et cetera. It's just been, frankly, Gary, just the calling of my life.
So you get to that fork where there's two directions
Yes.
you can go, policy or politics?
Yes.
Did you assess that policy was a more viable pathway as opposed to politics?
Well, I think for me, they've all been one and the same. I think the only thing in my case is I've just not taken the leap and decided and discovered that it was my calling and mission to be the actual, you know, elected official public servant. But there's no way that I can engage in what I do from a policy perspective without it entering the world of politics. It just so happens that, I'd like to think that I've played a role, a positive role in the lives of certain communities with certain public servants. And I make a distinction between politicians and public servants. I love public servants. I'm not really crazy about politicians. I look at this work from a servant leadership standpoint when it comes to service.
I wish more people felt the way you do. I really do. So tell me about your first client. You hang out your shingle, 6 months.
Yes.
So who goes first? How do you get that person?
It was born again, and this is where the interesting, connective tissue between my work in civil rights and social justice connects with business. I went to Washington, D.C. And I thought that, all of my network and relationships would yield businesses and business opportunities, but it wasn't so. But there was a civil rights heroine that I'd met early in my journey. Her name is Doris Crenshaw. She's based in Montgomery, Alabama. And one day she called me to a dinner in Washington, D.C., didn't tell me what the dinner was about, didn't even tell me who was joining us for dinner. And she told the gentleman, as we were going about dinner, she interrupted dinner and said, you're going to give Lamell an opportunity. You're going to give Lamell a contract. And I recall that in my book, The Power to Persist. I recall that story and I almost choke on what I'm eating, Gary, because I'm like, whoa, where did this come from? And he, did not, blink. He kept eating his food and he just looked up and said, okay. And his name was Julian Smith and the company was Alabama Power. And to this day, I'm still very closely affiliated with Southern Company and the entire power company infrastructure.
So when you left dinner and you were by yourself,
Yeah.
did you actually believe that just happened?
Yeah, I was like, what just happened? And I really didn't get it. And it was, probably one of the best forays in business and very much connects to, my work. We've been able to do a lot of positive impact and engagement on behalf of communities from a policy standpoint. And even when you talk about resilience and persistence, it translates when you talk about energy in communities and how you serve customers. And so I'm very proud of the affiliation that I've had with all of my clients and the work that we do.
So we're 2 decades later,
Yes.
multiple clients,
Yes.
lots of experience gained. If you could write yourself a letter back to 2002, what would you do different, if anything?
What a wonderful question. There's always room for improvement, Gary. I wish that I were a better steward of both my time, my resources, and my energy. I think, as I reflect back on my journey of over 2 decades, the word balance, for those of us who are entrepreneurs, it sounds great theoretically, but being able to live it and get it. And, as an entrepreneur, I probably have traded off, Gary, some aspects of my personal life that I wish I could go back. But and sometimes it is a trade-off and it's very much connected to the balance. I probably would do a better job of balancing my work and my personal life.
I know that it's hard sometimes to separate them,
Yes,
um, because you're always on to the next thing.
no doubt about it.
And you're only as good as the last thing you did, and you're always going to come up with another idea. It's both, I think, a blessing and a curse.
Yes,
Look at it. In my world, growing up in wealth management, primarily at Merrill Lynch and UBS,
yes.
we classified advisors into 3 categories: those that made things happen, those that watched things happen, and those that
Hmm.
sat around and said, WTF just happened.
Hmm.
What happened? And the people that change lives, whether you're
Yes.
working with clients or you're working with public policy, are literally the people that make things happen. But more importantly, don't necessarily know what the cookbook is to make that occur. You figure it out as you go. You jump off the building and you figure it out as you go. And your brain is funny that way
Yeah.
because it all of a sudden, hey, it's pretty important. I better figure out how to stick this landing or it's going to get bad. And all of a sudden, that's your focus. And the answers, which were probably running around in your brain somewhere, all of a sudden they come up, they appear. Um, so tell me about a typical day now with your clients. What represents a challenging day for you at this point?
Well, the thing I love about my work and being an entrepreneur, and I know your listeners can relate to this, is that no day is the same, right? There could be something legislative, there could be a crisis, there can be an influencer or an elected official that we need. I mean, literally, you never know. But most times there are fires that need to be addressed and put out. And it's a mix between, inoculation and initiation. And that's the world in which I live, somewhere in between, being proactive and being reactive.
So as you look at where we are now, eh,
Yes,
I try and stay away from politics, but I don't even think we're in politics anymore. I'm not sure what this is.
everything is political, Gary, whether you like it or
Yeah.
not.
Where are we relative in your experience in the overall pantheon of evolution? Where are we and what are we doing right now?
Yeah, we're at a pivotal moment, and like you, I will not, transition your podcast into a political hour, but we're in a very pivotal transitional moment, and the thing that I wrestle with the most, Gary, is, what are the implications for young people? Both young people who've yet to be born, but also the young people who are observing this moment in time, both domestically and internationally. I am of the belief that any community is only as good as its focus on young people. And so, what messages, what takeaways, what are we teaching? What kind of world and environment are we creating for young people? What are we modeling for young people? What are we leaving for young people? Those are the pressing questions for me. And frankly, Gary, I don't know and I don't have all of the answers for those, but I know that our future and the implications of our future are embedded in those questions, not what we think we see on the news and what we read uh, on the internet. I believe at the heart of where we should be focused is our what are the implications for the young people, both currently and those yet to come.
It's an interesting quandary. I don't know that there is a ready solution.
Yeah.
Growing up, we had, ABC, NBC, and CBS, and you got the news, and you would never question what you got. It wasn't entertainment, it was just the facts, and the credibility was there.
Yeah, all I know, because you asked me about my childhood, all I know is that when I think about elected officials and public servants, the first thing, I remember were folks who were well read, folks who could articulate, issues, folks who literally cared about the communities in which they served, folks who knew how to build bridges across political aisles, folks who were determined to do the right thing. Those are the only models that I've had and that I look to, and that's where my origins were. And so, I'm hoping that somewhere in the midst of these times, young people will do like I did and resonate towards those who are seeking the greater good for all.
I think you were more fortunate than most in that you had a sense early on, from wherever it came from, a sense of leadership through service, which I
Yes.
think is just an absolutely laudable and commendable quality to have. I know you've interacted with a lot of people in a lot of different situations.
Yes.
Anything stand out as kind of a moment where you were in a conversation and something just came up where it just struck you and you said, I never thought about it that way before. And it gave you kind of an alternative point of view that maybe you didn't share. Anything resonate there?
You know, we share a bond, although this is our first time meeting. You, like me, have had a sojourn in the financial services world. And, the thing that really struck me during my time at Edward Jones, especially working with and on behalf of financial advisors, was the emphasis on the client. Uh, I I was blown away and amazed by the financial advisors, you know, dogged dogged focus on the clients and the things that these individuals would do and how they were hyper focused, embedded in communities, serving clients. That really resonated with me. And I'm sure in your past life and the work that you've done, it was those financial advisors, those individuals that helped communities and families get on the road to what we call, and what I talk about in the book, a resilient future. How do you build a resilient future from a financial standpoint for your children, your grandchildren, and yourself? And it was those individuals who actually kept as their primary focus the clients who distinguish themselves and really working on behalf of communities that we both love and serve. And so, you know, that actually was one of the catalysts that put on my mind, this notion of resilience, right? Making communities and families and people more able and prepared to have a prosperous and enjoyable future for themselves and for their descendants. And so resilience cuts across all sectors, not just for individuals, not just the habits that we need to embody as individuals, but frankly, the habits that we need to embody from an industry standpoint as entrepreneurs and for communities.
As you were speaking, it just dawned on me that your life as a lobbyist, my life as a financial advisor,
Yeah.
working on behalf of others. And
Yes.
unlike a lot of other professions where it's kind of episodic, you go to the lawyer when you need them, you go to your accountant when you need them. Your world and my world, you're married to these people.
No
If
doubt about it.
you're on board 24/7 and you're there representing them. And that's a heavy lift a lot of times if you're not cut out for it. If you are, I think it's a wonderful spot to be because you're acting to not only help others, but sometimes protect them from themselves.
You
As
know,
I'm sure you've had those experiences with some of your clients.
Gary, it's again, it's this line, it's this through line of advocacy. As a financial advisor, from what I do from a government relations and consulting standpoint, the through line through all of it is this notion of advocating on behalf of
Absolutely true.
others, right?
Couldn't
That's
agree
what
more.
that's to make a positive impact on the lives of others. And that's what we seek to do every day, and that's the commonality.
That's wonderful. Tell me how people find you. How do they find your book? How do they find you online if they want to learn more?
Thank you very much. The book, The Power to Persist, is available everywhere where books are sold. We have a new podcast by the same title, available wherever podcasts can be listened to. The Power to Persist. I'm Lamell MC, LinkedIn, Instagram, and lamellmcmorris.com. Those are all the places, Gary, where I can be found.
Mel, it's been an absolute pleasure having you join me for this brief conversation. I hope we can do it again.
I look
Uh,
forward to it, and I thank you very much, Gary.
it's my pleasure. I'm gonna search you out on LinkedIn because I think your message resonates across so many different things, and especially at a time of uncertainty like this, going back to really kind of what the best human condition can be, I think is the only way we're going to see our way through. I have faith
Amen.
we're going to be okay.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
You've been listening to If the Public Only Knew with Lamell McMorris, PhD, and all around gentleman and cool guy. Check him out online. This is Gary Cinderbrand. Hopefully we'll see you on the next episode of If the Public Only Knew. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to If the Public Only Knew. Don't forget to follow the show and share it with anyone who's ready for the real raw stories behind the business successes. Join Gary next time for another powerful conversation that will leave you inspired and ready to take action.